Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. On today's show, we break down another tough week for the Mets and if pitching help could be on the way from the minors. We also go down on the farm as Francisco Alvarez finds his power surge in Syracuse. We make some scoreboard predictions and, of course, answer your mailbag questions. But as promised, we didn't forget to give away some Mets Pod hats. So subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every episode on SNY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your shows. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Taking a Cadillac is more than just taking a drive. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate every journey. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMayo. And Joe, the week that was, another crappy week for the Mets. And to be honest, we can only cheer up 4 people this week. Those are going to be our 4 winners of the Mets Pod hat giveaway sweepstakes. So we'll announce those 4 names later in the show. But quite simply, Joe, 2-4 since the last podcast. They get embarrassed in Pittsburgh in the last 3. It felt like things had started to turn in the second half of the series at home against Atlanta, but we're kind of right back to where we were last week, Joe, after the Mets' miserable showing with 3 blowout losses against the Pirates.
Connor, it's tough. As you mentioned, they obviously lost the first game against Atlanta after he recorded. Then they take care of the next 2 in, I don't want to say like completely convincing fashion for both, but they won the games and everything looked a little more normal and it felt, all right, they're going to break out of it now. And going into Pittsburgh, again, you never expect to sweep anyone, but I went in and was like, Mets are taking 2 out of 3 against the Pirates. There's no Paul Skeens. There's nothing stopping them, I guess, except themselves right now because they couldn't get Pirates hitters out. O'Neal Cruz was hitting the ball all over the place. The Mets pitching didn't really show up. The offense didn't really show up. It was a really tough weekend for the Mets. And, we're talking 3-13 over the last 16 games. So this stretch is now beyond, okay, it was a bad week or it was a bad 10 days. This is a bad over 2 weeks of games. And it's not about to get easier even though they're coming home where they've played much better. Milwaukee and the Yankees as the games this week, it's not going to get easier.
All right, it's a real gut check time because when you're down and out, it's not like there's massive magical help on the way in the form of the schedule, which we thought the Pirates series could have been. And credit to the Pirates, since they moved on from their manager, they've played better, they've played closer games. I think their pitching is really well-rounded. It's not just Skeens. They have a pretty decent starting rotation. They have some good arms in the bullpen. But the bigger issue was, Joe, the Pirates are just a horrendous offensive baseball team. And we were joking last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, that Andrew McCutchen, approaching 40 years old, was leading the team in OPS. They've had a down year from Brian Reynolds. Ke'Bryan Hayes has never really turned into the player they hoped he would be, as is with a lot of their young players. They were getting no offense. And then you turn on those 3 games, you would think, whether it's Reynolds, whether it's Ke'Bryan Hayes, whether it's all of these guys, that they were all going to the All-Star game with how they just absolutely embarrassed Mets pitching. And I think what was more frustrating in that capacity is because the Mets pitching is a real problem right now, and it's going to look a lot different a couple weeks from now, but that doesn't mean the Mets could just lay over and die right now, is that the offense never really responded, Joe. It really didn't. There was not a lot of moments of, okay, we're stringing together a couple hits, or here's a 3-run home run. We've talked in length about the issues at the bottom half of the lineup. Francisco Lindor is really, really cold right now. Pete Alonso has had some hits, but he's not hitting for power like we're accustomed to seeing him do, especially those first couple months of the season. Juan Soto just had arguably the greatest June a Met has ever had, but he's just one player. So it's not one problem, Joe. Like, that's the thing right now with this team. And we've seen Steve Cohen tweet about it. We've heard about the team meeting. But at the end of the day, and you could see Steve Cohen's tweet if you're watching on YouTube, he said, this is a tough stretch. There's no sugarcoating it. We're going to get through this. But I think, and he touched on this in the tweet, do you believe that it's unlikely this lack of production hitting with runners in scoring position will continue? Or are we at the point in the season where, unfortunately, for as much talent they have, this is who the Mets are? Because I would understand if somebody sat here the first week of July and looked at me and said, why should I believe anything else is going to change? I've watched this for months.
Connor, You're exactly right. And anyone who has questions, I get it, right? Like, this is not, the Mets haven't struggled with runners in scoring position over this losing streak. And we're trying to extrapolate that and be like, well, now is the end. And this is what, from here on, they haven't hit with runners in scoring position all year. They've been a relatively successful offense, and the pitching has carried them mostly, but runners in scoring position has been a problem all year. And here's the thing. At this point, my hands are up. Right. I don't know what to do. What can you do? They have good hitters, especially 1 through 5. 6 through 9 is something that they navigate day in and day out and try to get through. I don't know if there's more pressure put on the top guys because they know if they don't do it, the bottom of the order probably isn't. But hey, look, I don't know. I don't know what the approach is, because like, you can designate an approach like hunt early fastballs with runners in scoring position because pitchers want to get ahead, and then they spin a couple breaking balls in and you're down 0-2. Now you're on the defensive and you're not on the offensive. I would imagine the Mets will not finish the season 29th in baseball hitting with runners in scoring position. So by definition, Steve Cohen's probably right that there are better days ahead for hitting with runners in scoring position. But I don't know that we're going to get to the point where the Mets are hitting at the top of the league in that statistical category.
Yeah, I think that it's hard to fathom, of course, right? The numbers that they have with runners in scoring position because of how much talent they have on offense. And naturally, there's really only one direction for it to go. But that's not the conversation. As you just said, Joe, are the Mets gonna? I haven't had one of those in a long time.
Yeah, what are the Jets gonna do?
And we're getting close to training camp. The Mets naturally will probably be a little better than this, but that's not the goal this season right now. And it makes you wonder. I look at it and it just makes me wonder. David Stearns is a guy that rightfully so wants to be calculated. I would say more of a slower burn at building a sustainable model with this team. And you've seen that with his strategy with pitching, which I think is ultimately his long-term strategy. We always believed that the Juan Soto move was more of a Steve Cohen move, although Juan Soto is such a great player that's kind of an outlier move. But you have to wonder, there are expectations, understandably, you'd think, from Steve Cohen and the Met fan this year, that David Stearns might have to operate out of his comfort zone in a couple of weeks. And that doesn't mean you say, I have to trade Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean for rentals because I have to. Like, he was brought here to do a job. And I don't think Steve Cohen is going to, kind of light the coals under his feet and say, listen, man, whatever it takes to get over the hump this year. I don't think that's the year the Mets are in. I think there is more pressure than we've seen in a while. And I think that Stearns might have to, if there's prospects that he doesn't project as high as the external world does, I think there's going to have to be a conversation, Joe, of being a little bit more aggressive in certain areas. And maybe this kind of comes full circle because I think the first trade target we've ever really talked about this year, and I'm using him as an example. I'm not saying he's going to be available, but you look at Jarren Duran. The idea of that trade is you're not trading for a rental. So you're more willing to give up premium assets because you're trying to get a more long-term solution. Maybe that's the meaning of the middle, that Stearns goes out and says, if there's guys on the market that are going to cost a lot, at least allow me to get multiple years of some kind of production. And if there's rentals out there, I'll try to go get them, but I'm not going to surrender real assets to go get rentals because that's just not the kind of model we're building. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Mets approach this because it feels like what they need requires Stearns to go outside of his comfort zone, Joe.
Yeah, we'll get into a little more because we have it in Down on the Farm, I think, a little bit more about like what prospects they can trade and what they can't trade. But overall, it's going to be very interesting because, as you said, I think David Stearns wants to build a certain way. And that, to me, entails not making the quote-unquote massive trade for rentals. Like when the Padres last year dealt top 100 prospect plus to get Tanner Scott for 2 months and all these kind of things. Like that, to me, honestly, I don't think David Stearns is ever going to do something like that. And frankly, it's probably smart that he doesn't. But there's no question that this is a win now team coming off the NLCS. They need to make a push to improve. What I'm going to be most interested to follow at the deadline is who is actually going to be available. Like, we have theoretical names, but a lot of them, those teams might not even end up selling. Like, if the Red Sox play pretty good for a while, Jared Duran is not on the market, or Aroldis Chapman is not on the market. Like, they're going to try to add and try to win. So who the sellers are, I think, are still fleshing themselves out. But David Stearns and the Mets, I think maybe when we check back on this episode after the All-Star break and we have a Mets pod, then we'll have a better feel of what the rotation looks like from a health perspective, what the bullpen looks like, how is third base shaking out? Like, did Mark Vientos grab a hold of it because Jesse Winker is working his way back? So the deadline's a big conversation. It's going to be a good part of this show and every show between now and July 31st. But there's still a lot of time that the Mets have to figure out a way to, one, right the ship, and two, figure out what they have leading into the deadline.
That's exactly right. The Red Sox have been losing a lot more games than winning games since they traded Devers. So that's why they're a team that, that comes up in conversation. But as we sit here, it's still too early. A lot of teams think they're still in it and aren't willing to wave that white flag. And back to the hitting conversation, Joe, because this conversation just won't go away. And we are not a podcast that, ducks from popular topics amongst the Mets fan base, which is lovely, but crazy at times. And I think that's part of the reason we love it so much. I think, Joe, there's not a lot of buttons you can press this time of year as a baseball organization, right? That's always teams aren't selling yet. And the way the deadline is structured right now, the sellers might not really be in high volume anyway, but we can confidently say the first week of July, teams aren't selling yet. The Mets have a pretty expensive, talented lineup, and the Met fan wants to know how no one is held accountable for this. I'm not sitting here saying Eric Chavez should be fired or the Mets should make a move, but I think it's fair to have the conversation in the world of what buttons can you actually press, and when you realize there aren't a lot, and that this team's approach so often looks so poor, Joe, that's a conversation that naturally is not going to go away. And I don't know where you stand on the belief of how much you can really hold the hitting coach, accountable in this sport. But I think compared to expectations for a lot of these Mets bats, and especially the way the young players have underperformed and a lot of guys have regressed, I think it's at least a fair topic to say, what is this team's game plan when they go into these series? Because for a long time now, outside of the guys that already have their own identity, Juan Soto has his own identity and way of going about things. Pete Alonso does as well. We've already heard about Pete Alonso's external work he does, with his people around him. Francisco Lindor is established. That's not the guys we're talking about here, Joe. There has to be a question at least of what is this team actually being taught and what is the infrastructure in place for this lineup, because it's not producing the results that it should be.
For sure. And look, anyone can be held to the fire. Like, I'm not here to say, I'm not calling for anyone to be fired. I'm not calling, and I'm not going against anyone that wants the hitting coach fired. But at the same time, I don't know. Like, you think Eric Chavez is telling these guys to wave at balls in the dirt and chase pitches? Like, I don't know how much of the quote unquote approach that they're in complete control of with these young players. I know they certainly have an impact, and young players do listen to coaching. The one thing I will say, so let's just play in the world that a lot of Met fans, because you all tweet at me and I see it on Twitter, like, about getting rid of Eric Chavez. Just so you know, the replacement for Eric Chavez is going to be internal. They're not going they're not going to get rid of a hitting coach and bring someone off the street and just figure it out. The hitting coach they would theoretically replace him with would probably be Jeremy Barnes, who is the assistant hitting coach.
Who Mets fans also don't like.
Exactly. So let's rewind a couple years, though, Connor. Jeremy Barnes in 2023 took over as the main hitting coach when the Mets moved Chavez to bench coach. And the offense obviously didn't do the job. 2023 was not exactly the best year for the Mets. So 2024 circles around. They moved Chavez back to hitting coach. They shift Barnes back down to assistant hitting coach and brought in Gibbons to help Carlos Mendoza, get into the managerial world. So that's the alternative solution. And unfortunately, with a stretch that has been as bad as the Mets have had, 3-13 over the last 16, it's the worst mark in baseball. So there's no sugarcoating that. I don't know that it's just like get rid of the hitting coach and everything's fixed. It's not necessarily that simple. What the Mets need here is Mark Vientos to come back and perform the way, even if it's not quite what he did in 2024, they need a good Mark Vientos. And by the way, Mark Vientos' big 2024 was with Eric Chavez as the hitting coach.
Right.
So I guess what's the thing? Are we giving credit to someone else when it's good and then docking the coach when it's bad? So Vientos needs to perform, and they need Jesse Winker back. If you could get Mark Vientos playing better, and you could get a professional hitter like Jesse Winker back, I think the lineup will elongate itself a little bit. And not saying that Chavez will be, off the hook, because Connor, the Mets had the best record in baseball, and people were tweeting me that Eric Chavez needed to be fired. So I don't think that has anything necessarily to do with it. But look, we'll talk about anything that comes up, and we try to be in touch with what people think and want to hear about. But I just think, to me, that feels scapegoaty.
I think that's fair. I think the Mets, and this might come off a little bit too simple, but the Mets right now are a team that needs to regain their confidence. And I think we're going to get to the rotation in just a second. I think when some of these starters go out there and just get destroyed in the first 3 innings of the game, it kind of kills your confidence and your approach at the plate. And that's not an excuse. I'm just saying, I think there's been a trickle effect here that when the pitching has started to really, really fall on its face, that instead of the offense picking up the pitching, unfortunately, it's kind of just led everything into a spiral. And I think one way the Mets can kind of get some of their confidence back, besides healthy reinforcements in a couple of weeks of the pitching, is having this lineup have a little bit more matchup-based setting. And Vientos has not hit left-handed pitching this year, which is really been the biggest surprise. I mean, it's only been 50 plate appearances, Joe, but his OPS is under 500 against left-handed pitching. It's hard to fathom for a guy that when he was coming up through the system, no left-handed pitcher could keep the ball in the ballpark against him. So, and then you look at, and this isn't just a minor league situation. Vientos last year had 139 plate appearances against lefties. He hit 300 and had an 884 OPS. 300. Think about how many guys in the sport in general even hover around 300. So against lefties, Vientos was a 300 hitter and with power. So if you want a glass half full approach on the Mets pod today, and it's not going to be a ton of that, because we're pretty honest. And I don't want to paint Jesse Winker as a savior, because that's not fair to Jesse Winker. But I do think there is a trickle effect incoming that Winker getting a lot of the matchups against righties and maybe limiting Vientos in some capacity. He's not only going to play against lefties, because you can't do that to a young player. But if you can play him in that DH role against lefties and get his confidence going again against lefties, there is a trickle effect here of matchups, which the Mets love to play. If you're sitting there wondering for weeks, why did this team just constantly play Jared Young? The Mets liked Jared Young against righties. It didn't work. There was glimpses of the power he has against righties, but the Mets are playing matchups in spots where they're allowed to play matchups. It's why they love that Francisco Lindor is a switch hitter at the top of the order, right? It's why they love having a platoon at DH. That's how the Mets structure it. They want a platoon at DH. So there's your glass half full approach of it, but that kind of leads us to the pitching problem, Joe. It's not getting any better. They're not going to be healthy for a couple more weeks. At what point do you just have to press the real button that is one of Nolan McLean or Brandon Sproat? And I don't think Sproat is in the conversation, even though he just had his best start in AAA recently. I mean, at some point, how many times, Joe, can you throw Paul Blackburn out on the mound and just hope for a different result? And by the way, Friday night against the Yankees, do you really think it's going to be different? Because I don't.
Yeah, Connor, I'm going to be honest, and you know how I am with this stuff. I am
patient.
I am so patient that I annoy people with
Makes
how
you want to
patient
shake
I
you
am.
sometimes.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, Connor. It lines up. And by the way, I just want this. I don't think the Mets are going to do this. I'm calling up Brandon Sproat to start on Paul
Interesting.
Blackburn's spot. They line up on the exact same day. And yes, Sproat has had an up and down year at AAA Syracuse. He's coming off his best start. He's been much better of late. The issue here, and it's the same issue we'll talk about Nolan McLean as well. They both kind of have this issue right now, a little more extreme on Sproat's side, but they both have some real platoon splits right now at the AAA level. Right-handed hitters are hitting 175 with a 546 OPS against Sproat with Syracuse. Lefties, 319 with a 909 OPS.
That's devastating.
Now that's 30 seconds after me saying I would call up Brandon Sproat to start against the Yankees on Friday night at Citi Field. I was really encouraged, and I know it's just one start, and I'm trying not to be too reactionary to it. His velocity was up almost an average of 2 miles an hour on his fastball. He brought his curveball into play, got a lot of whiffs on it, specifically against left-handed hitters. I think Sproat is actually evolving, and we're not just seeing the highlights that we're seeing from Jonah Tong, the highlights that we're seeing from Nolan McLean. But I think Sproat is under the radar, under the hood. I mean, I guess as under the radar as someone like Sproat could be, developing as a pitcher. And you just look at the baseline stats and you're like, his ERA is over 5. He stinks. He's not a prospect anymore.
All right.
I would actually really consider it, giving him a shot just because the days line up. And to be honest with you, Paul Blackburn, I think the Mets right now, with the way their rotation is performing, Clay Holmes is kind of not limited to 5 innings, but he's going to be largely a 5-inning pitcher going forward. Frankie Montas had one really good start, one not good start, but you're looking at him as between a 5 and 6 inning pitcher. Blade Tidwell, I know a lot of people aren't happy with him, but that's a young pitcher that's going to get an opportunity here. How long is he going to go into games? I think having that traditional long man provides value. So if I were in charge, and it's probably better that I'm not, but if I were in charge, I would call it Brandon Sproat to start Friday against the Yankees. I would shift Paul Blackburn to the bullpen, have that traditional long guy that could give you 3-4 innings. And then when you look at Nolan McLean, I'm really confident he's going to have an impact on this team. I think it's going to be in the second half. I think it's going to be, maybe in August, because as you said, these arms are going to come back. So you want to be somewhat cognizant of the fact that with these guys coming back, you don't want to call these young players up just to start a game or to start 2 games and then just go back down. That's really not optimally what you want to do with a top prospect. But Nolan McLean has been fantastic. He's allowed 2 runs or less in all but one of his starts with AAA. As I mentioned, the splits, so I'll bring those numbers for you. Righties, even better than Sproat, and Sproat's numbers fantastic. 160 average, 452 OPS righties against McLean, which makes sense. He pumps in his fastball. He's got that sweeper, which is devastating to right-handed hitters. Lefties, they're not doing nearly as well as they are against Sproat, but hitting 242 with a 726 OPS. What he's working on right now is a curveball and a changeup. He needs to get something that gets lefties more consistently out. But Nolan McLean, no question in my mind, is going to make a real impact on the Mets. Now it's just a matter of when that time is he going to be a starting pitcher or is he going to be a reliever? I think the health and trade deadline will dictate what exactly McLean's role will be to help the Mets in the second half.
I think they need a spark. And I think that, I'm fine with having McLean come up and start, knowing you need to kind of watch his innings this year, that if he starts at 2 or 3 games, Joe, and then the Mets are healthy all of a sudden in their rotation and he moves to the pen, who cares? The Mets are trying to win games right now. And McLean's development, Spro, listen, I would applaud it if they give him a shot on Friday, but I also have no problem with being a little careful with his development, trying to kind of get that trajectory back on an upward swing like it has been recently for the long term and keeping him in the minors. I think McLean has shown enough that he can contribute to this team in a variety of ways for the rest of the year. And it doesn't have to be so static of, well, if he comes up, he's got to be in the rotation the rest of the year. Who cares? Who cares? Is he going to help the team win games? Okay, start until Senga and Minaya are back, and then you're going to move to the bullpen where, oh, fun fact, the Mets also need help all of a sudden. So
I get it. The only counterpoint that I would have to that is once you make that move, there is no turning back this year. So you can't put McLean you can't call him up for a couple starts and say, all right, we're healthy, everything's good, you're going to go impact the bullpen. And then at the end of August, be like, well, now we kind of want to start McLean again. Like you can't unstretch him and then re-stretch him out during the year. That's something that Mendoza and Stearns have talked about. But I will say there's the more this struggle goes on, the more pressure is going to be on. And I do agree with your general premise of, I would say probably McLean is closer to ready than Sproat is. I'm just thinking about lining up throw days and things like that. But I'm really excited to see Nolan McLean, and I can't wait to, see what he does against big league hitters, because I think he's going to be impactful one way or another.
And I just think, Joe, and this is more, we are often an analytically inclined podcast, but I think there is an emotion and a human element here. And not to pile on the guy, but the numbers are the numbers. I think the team just knows they have no chance to win with Blackburn on the mound. And the numbers pretty much back it up where, listen, he's got a 4.5 ERA in the first inning. He's got a 12 ERA in the second inning. He's got a 6 ERA in the third inning. 3 innings into Paul Blackburn starts, the Mets are being blown out. It's really that simple at this point, or appearances, I should say, because we've also seen him come in relief help. And the numbers are the numbers at this point. He's not getting anyone out. I mean, right-handed hitters are batting .415 off him. .415. And then you sit there and going, okay, well, what is he doing to lefties? Lefties are batting .317. There is a world where Blackburn's been partially lucky at times compared to what the numbers, you could sit there and say, how does he even get to the 4th inning with numbers like that? And I know it's mean, but that's not the premise. The premise here isn't to be mean. The premise here is to be that, listen, we've all played sports or competed in some kind of team format in our lives. You all listening to this have either been partnered with somebody on a group project, had a teammate, whatever it is, where you knew when they needed to do something, whether it was part of the sport you played, the group project you did, whatever it was, that you had no chance. And as confident as you are as a human being, there is an internal element that you just knew it. And I think the Mets feel that with Blackburn right now. And I think we are dangerously close to, unfortunately, feeling that with Frankie Montas, because there was so much noise around Montas's rehab starts, where the point Carlos Mendoza addressed it head on. And then he kind of surprised everybody in his return. I thought the stuff looked good, to be fair. And then reality kind of struck against Pittsburgh, which is not a good lineup. I cannot emphasize this enough. That it was embarrassing what happened in Pittsburgh. That you can't be living in a baseball world where 2 of your 5 starters give you no chance, Joe. And there is going to be help on the way. But not to be dramatic, I don't know if the Mets can wait from a morale perspective. Even if they throw Sproat or McLean out there Friday against the Yankees and the Mets lose 5-3, it's much different than going to Pittsburgh and losing every day 9-1 to the Pirates. It is different. I know it counts the same in the standings, but from a team, clubhouse, and morale standpoint and getting ready for the next day, it is different.
I don't disagree at all. And I'd say it's early on Montas. I think a lot of the Montas stuff is the fact that fans didn't want the Mets to sign him in the first place.
That's very fair.
And then he got hurt in spring training, and then he wasn't good on his rehab assignment. So it was just everything everyone thought. It's like, well, see, we're right. This wasn't a good move. Then he's awesome for a start, not so good for a second. So I don't even think we're dangerously close there from maybe the team perspective. But when Paul Blackburn takes the mound, and last week was the unfortunate pile on Jared Young podcast. I guess this week is the pile on Paul Blackburn podcast, but if you are those offensive players, you got to think every time Paul Blackburn takes the mound, you got to feel like, man, we better score 6 today, or there's just not really going to be much of a chance. So I think that's the spot that if you want to call up a young player and you want to provide that spark, and I think there is something to that young player spark. I think there is something, it's not quantifiable, but I think there is something there. And I would be more than happy to give a young player a shot instead of Paul Blackburn Friday night against the Yankees at Citi Field. Maybe Blackburn would surprise us and pitch okay, but I would go into that game personally feeling like, all right, well, if the Mets want to win this series, they better pull off Saturday and Sunday.
All right, let's get back to our new segment, Back on the Farm. We'll get to Down on the Farm in just a second, but Francisco Alvarez is back on the farm, Joe, and the good news is he's hitting home runs. It feels like all these guys that get back down to Syracuse or wherever they go on the road to play and they hit home runs, it does look like his batting stance has kind of reverted back to his old batting stance, Joe. Do you think there's anything to this, or is this our classic, man, when Vientos and Baty and Mauricio and Acuna, they all go back to AAA, they just simply rake?
Maybe a mix of both, right? Like, I think when you go to AAA, it is a hitter's league. They're going to be better. And at the end of the day, Francisco Alvarez is a professional major league caliber hitter. I know he hasn't shown it consistently this year, but when he goes to AAA, he really should be mashing home runs against those guys. But the stance and hand placement is definitely something worth noting. I don't know how much more open he is necessarily, but if you watched Alvarez kind of throughout this season, he started the season very closed off, like almost perfectly square. And then he kind of like opened a little bit. He got a little closer to it, just prior to when he got sent down. But that looks like the hand placement, which if you're watching, like earlier this year, his hands were kind of like upright. And here with AAA Syracuse, it's kind of almost like he's holding that bag over his shoulder, which is something that he always has done. I don't know if this is a change that, JP Arancibia and the coaching staff down at AAA are kind of imploring on him to do, because that change he made, I'm just going to say it, that was an off-season move from the external place that kind of JD Martinez recommended for Alvarez, and that's where he changed his swing to what you saw at the beginning of the year. But if you could get Alvarez back to the way he was, where he's more comfortable in his mechanics, I don't know how consistent of a performer he's going to be. But I'm also going to say, while we're talking about guys that are not performing, I appreciate Luis Torrens, and he hit a home run and had a single in the blowout game on Sunday against Pittsburgh. Watching Luis Torrens hit every day, I would rather just take a chance that Alvarez will figure it out. Like,
there's a reason Torrens is a backup.
Yeah. I don't know how much longer I'm willing to sit and deal with the Torrens, and no offense to Hayden Sanger, he won me a point on the scoreboard, so I love Hayden Sanger for life. I love Hayden Sanger for life, but I would say sooner than later, I'd like to get Alvarez back up here with these potentially back to normal swing mechanics, and hope he can build off the home runs that he's hitting in AAA.
I want to be fair, too. This is me basically calling myself out, Joe. When Alvarez broke the hamate bone, number one thing we said on this show was, no matter how early he returns, the power is going to take months, not weeks, literally months. And Alvarez returned, I think, a little earlier than expected, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
And besides the opposite field home run immediately upon returning, which kind of carried out, I mean, it counts the same, but he didn't have that crazy center field pull power we're used to seeing. He didn't have any power since he's been back. And there's larger issues with Alvarez offensively than just that, and obviously defensively. But if you're trying to, once again, look for the glass half full side of this, there is history to tell us that when healthy, Alvarez in August and September can provide some power out of a position that every team is just, unless you're the Mariners and you have Cal Riley on your team, like every team is just dying for any ounce of power they can get out of their catching position. So I kind of want to call back to that, because Alvarez deserves the criticism for being a disappointment this year, but it's also, at some point, you do need to be fair to the original points of the injury.
And honestly, Connor, like you're gonna bat Alvarez like 8th or ninth anyway.
Of
Like
course.
he's not coming back to bat 5th, so you're gonna bat him towards the bottom of the order. And another thing I want to point out, which is just I think a credit to the type of person and worker that Alvarez is. He's down there. He's working on both the offensive and defensive side of the game, talking to people within the system. Like there's people that are crediting Alvarez for Brandon Sproat's start that we just talked about.
Interesting.
So he was able to help him through that start, and they called different pitches than Sproat had historically been doing. So, look, I think Alvarez, the question ultimately to me is, will he ever reach the ceiling that he was projected to have? And I think that's a valid one that the jury's still somewhat out, but, time is ticking on that. But I still think Francisco Alvarez has all the ingredients of an everyday, perfectly solid catcher that you hopefully can get back to that 20 to 25 home runs that he had as a rookie. Like that is in there. He is strong. He has power. It's just a matter of getting separated from that hamate bone. And he hit a couple bombs. Like he has, I think, 3 home runs at the big leagues. That one that got out to right, the 450 or 441 to center in Colorado. So whatever, it's Colorado. And then the day before he gets sent down, he hits a 450-foot shot that looked like vintage Alvarez. And then he gets sent down. So better days hopefully ahead for Alvarez. And I'm hopeful that maybe, All-Star break? Like maybe after the All-Star break, you bring Alvarez back, if not a little sooner, because this offense needs just any possible jolt that it could get.
My galaxy brain theory that after McLean and Sproat come up here and have success is that Alvarez going down and getting to work with them in the middle of the season actually paid long-term dividends. So anyways, that was back on the farm. Now we go to down on the farm, a staple. Mailbag edition. Dan from DC, thank you for the 5-star review. I check the stats every start. Explain to me why Jonah Tong isn't up in AAA already. Side note here, Jonah Tong and Carson Benj, Joe, will be in the futures game. I know you've done some content for SMY on that, so you could check out SMY Mets on Twitter or SMY to check out more. But this just has to be a numbers game, right, Joe? I mean, there's no reason why Jonah Tong, from a performance standpoint, isn't in Syracuse yet.
I don't have a good reason other than it's kind of like a clutter of arms, and where the Mets are present day from a health standpoint, they need everybody stretched out at AAA that they possibly can because they don't know who they're going to have to call up. So does Jonah Tong belong in AAA? The answer is yes. He has done everything that he needs to do at the AA level. Is everything perfect? No. The walk rate's like a touch higher than you'd like it to be. He's still kind of hammering out the shape of his gyro slider. But if you're watching on YouTube right now, I mean, how are you disputing a 1.73 ERA and a minor league leading, so all of minor league baseball, 115 strikeouts in just 73 innings? He doesn't give up hits. When the ball's put in play, it's largely put on the ground. It's over a 55% ground ball rate with Jonah Tong. So, look, that time's coming, and I get posted to me every single time because whenever Jonah starts, my Twitter is on high alert. I'm ready to post his highlights. I'm ready to post what he does every single time out, which has just been dominating. If you wanted my guess, and this is just a guess, this is not source, this is not anything like that, I bet you right after the futures game, they'll announce that Jonah Tong's going to AAA, and that'll give him a sizable couple month sample at the AAA level to see, I guess, really outside the realm, maybe a bullpen option in September. But if we're being realistic, it just sets him up to be a significant factor in 2026.
All right, we got a little prospect dealing doubleheader here. 2 5-star reviews, so thank you very much, Jehovah11, the first one. Self-scouting is paramount when dealing from your prospect pool. See Crow, Armstrong, Pete, or Kellenick, Jared for both ends of the spectrum. Outside of Jet, Tong, McLean, and Pena, which prospects would you be most hesitant to include in a trade package? On the flip side, which of the more notable prospects would you be most willing to include to add a real piece? The second one is from Kevin Basta Jr. Thank you, Kevin, for the 5-star review. With the trade deadline looming, which of our prospects could be defined as untouchable? Which prospects do we have that could be of interest to other teams? Joe, these were literally probably written on your burner accounts. Take it away. I like seeing Pena in the group of players already.
You know what a 3 home run, double, and 8 RBI game will do for you. But look, when it comes to someone like Elian Pena, that's a very convoluted one because as talented as he is, like a team is not
He's a
trading like
teenager.
they're not trading like a premium type of player for Elian. So like he's not quote unquote untouchable, but there's just not a logical deal I think that could come up where he would be part of the conversation. What I would say from an untouchable standpoint, I don't firmly believe in that word. Tell me who's available. Who am I getting? But within the realm of, I guess, trying to be realistic about what I think is going to be available, Jet Williams is staying. Jonah Tong is staying. Nolan McLean is staying. And probably Carson Benj, but I think that's where it kind of starts to teeter just a little bit. But I think Benj would probably make my list. If you're getting beyond that, if someone wants Brandon Sproat in the right deal, I'm willing to talk.
Yeah.
If someone wants Ryan Clifford in the right deal, I'm willing to talk. And when you go down the system, and Will Salmon wrote a great piece, I think it was last week, I think he paired up with Ken Rosenthal on it. And they were talking about just teams like the depth of pitchers that the Mets have in their system. So we're focused on the top here and what you don't want to trade. But there are teams out there that they would like to get their hands on a Zach Thornton, who's pitching great in Double-A. They'd like to get their
Santucci, right?
Jonathan Santucci. They'd like to get their hands on a Douglas Oriana, Jack Wenninger. Like, there are names. The Mets have pitching at all levels here, and I think that's what organizations are trying to add. So when you think ahead to a month from now, when the Mets are, it's deadline day and the Mets have moves to make, think of the pitching in the system beyond maybe the very top guys, but think about the pitching. I think that's where you'll see the Mets make the most movement from.
And we saw them do this before, right? Like we saw the Mets last year willing to move volume arms, not the top 3 arms we talk about every week on this show, but the volume of arms to add. And I think, number one, just sitting here listening to you, Joe, and also reading these questions, and we've done this podcast long enough, and we've had long stretches of time where we've covered the farm system just as much, if not more, than the pro team. There's so many names in the Mets system all of a sudden. In just a span of 2 years, it feels like the sheer volume, and you just touched on that with the pitching, but really overall, the amount of volume in this system, which is the game you're playing when you're doing pitching. You're just trying to accumulate volume and hope that you get a couple hits out of it, and you could build a bullpen that way. You could build the middle and the back end of the rotation that way. And that's exactly what the Mets are trying to do here. So that wouldn't shock me at all. It is, I would side with you. I will be really floored after this deadline if Jet Williams, Jonah Tong, Nolan McLean are not still Mets. And you're right. Benj is really the thing with Benj is he was the team's first round pick last year. So the David Stearns operation, right? That's a big, to a lot of guys, it's a big deal. Your first round pick, and he's met or exceeded expectations already. So why would you'd have to get something pretty substantial back for a guy that you put your name on and is exceeding expectations. And the reality is with the Mets right now, as we've had the Nimmo conversation a million times, and there will be a ways way down the road where Juan Soto's a DH, the Mets are going to need corner outfield. They simply are. And Ben, you said it, Joe. Ben just getting some looks in center field. Maybe he can help you out in a pinch there. The Mets are going to need cheap outfield at some point. So if you have a guy shining in your system that looks to be that exact solution, you got to be careful how willing you are to move on from him. It's we'll talk more about young players and player movement throughout our normal mailbag, but the untouchable conversation is always interesting. You're listening to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SMY's YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Joe, let's go over our scoreboard predictions from last week. Over-under was 3.5 for Brandon Nimmo hits. We both went over. Nimmo had 6 hits. We both got a point. Over-under 1.5 for Juan Soto home runs. We both went over. Soto hit 3 home runs. We both got a point. Over-under push was at 1 for Pete Alonso home runs. Joe, you pushed. I went over. Pete didn't hit a home run last week, so no points awarded there. Yes or no, will Hayden Senger have 1 hit? Joe, you said yes. I said no. Senger had exactly one hit. I was at that game Wednesday against Atlanta. I didn't know whether to cheer or boo, honestly, in the moment. I actually just did nothing instead.
Yeah.
I just sat there like, yeah, of course.
Just no-sold it.
Yeah, I totally no-sold it. And it was a great day for the Mets anyway, so nobody probably noticed. Over-under push was at 1 for starters going 6 innings. Joe, you went over. I went over. I mean, come on. Like, Jeff just doesn't know what to do with this line at this point. 1. The line was 1 for a starter going 6 innings.
And they couldn't even hit it.
No one did it, by the way. The push didn't hit. The under was the play. I don't really know what's left to say about this anymore. Over under 3 for Mets wins. Joe, you pushed right at 3. I went over. Neither of us got a point. The Mets won 2 games. So, Joe, decent week for you, 3 points. A mediocre week for me. I had 2. We are now tied on the season 39-39. We have really just been kind of hovering even or a point apart most of the year. We got 6 games on this week's scorecard, and man, these are tough. 3 against the Brewers, 3 against the Yankees. Let's make some new scoreboard predictions here. Over-under push is at 1, Joe, for Pete Alonso home runs. You won the week, so you get to kick us off.
Pete Alonso went homerless this past week, and I can't imagine that's going to be an elongated stretch. So you know what? It's a big moment. They're back home at Citi Field. They really need to turn it around from just such a bad stretch. And Pete seems to turn it up in the big moments, and the Yankee games will be big moments. So I'm actually going to go over. I will say that Pete will hit over 1 home run this week.
I'll push here for Pete. I think he's got definitely a home run in the tank here. Obviously, a guy that feeds off the energy at home for sure. It's really, really tricky. I feel like with Pete, you should either go over or under because he hits him in bunches or he doesn't hit him at all. And I'm going against my own advice here, but I think the Brewers pitching is really, really good. You know, obviously the Yankees have some guys that are having a lot of success on the mound. They also have some guys that are hittable. So I'll go 1 home run for Pete here. Over under push is at 1 for Mark Vientos home runs. Man, I'm going to go under here, Joe. I got to see something from Vientos at this point. And I really, really hope this is the week he gets going, but you know, it's just tough to kind of get on board with that. And he had a couple against the Pirates in one at bat where he was ahead and he was pulling the ball and he was hitting the ball far and he ultimately struck out in a long at bat. But I just, based on the numbers, unfortunately, I'm going to go under here.
That was actually a really good at bat, and I was going to bring it up. Like, it didn't work out at the end, but all in all, a pretty good at bat. I'm going to push here. And the reason is not a great one. It's just the fact that last year, you and I were at a Subway Series game, and Mark Vientos hit 2 home runs against the Yankees. So they get the Yankees. Yeah, Vientos can hit 1 home run this week. So I will push and say he will hit 1.
Over-under push is at 1 for Francisco Alvarez home runs in AAA. 6 games, Joe. We are back to the minor league scoreboard predictions. All yours.
Oh, me. Okay. That's right. So I will go. I'll push. I think he could easily smack the over here. He might hit 2 tonight if he's in the lineup for Syracuse, but I'll push and say he hits 1.
This is the first time we're going to agree today. I'm going to push it as well with Alvarez. He hits for power in AAA. Obviously, the ball flies out of those parks. Will he play all 6 games? We'll see. If they use him as a DH when he's not catching. But ultimately, Alvarez is hitting for power down there. That's what he does. Over-under push is at 1 for Aaron Judge home runs against the Mets. Judge was really bad against the Mets at Yankee Stadium. In a series, the Yankees obviously outplayed the Mets. They won 2 of the 3 games, and the Yankees offense had some big moments. Judge was not great, honestly. And there was a lot of times last year where Judge was not great against the Mets, but man, at the rate he hits home runs, I know his batting average has gone from like 400 to 350 now, which is just hilarious that was even hovering around there for that long. Yeah. I'm going to say I'm going to push and go with 1. Judge has a home run. If I knew Paul Blackburn was starting Friday, I would take the over of 3.5 home runs. But for now, I'll push at 1.
Poor Paul Blackburn. It's just, we just pick a different culprit every week on this show. Just someone just gets all of our anger. But Connor, I will join you with a push. I think Judge will hit a home run, but I feel like, and maybe stats are against this, and I haven't looked it up. I don't feel like Aaron Judge has like dominated the Mets over the years. I feel like they've always handled them like reasonably well, but between the Mets kind of pitching maybe the back end, and maybe you'll grab the stats here in a second, but
I got him.
Between the back end kind of guys starting, Judge has to hit a home run, so I'll push.
So Judge, now keep in mind, he's been playing against the Mets since 2017. So our recent memory might not correlate with the overall numbers. Judge is hitting 306 against the Mets.
Oh.
He's got 30 hits, 12 homers, 22 RBIs, and 20 runs scored in 28 games. That's the thing. They don't play each other a lot, especially for that long stretch. Now they play each other more, but he's only played 28 games against the Mets. So when you think of it, it's not the way you look at Acuna, right? Against the Mets, where you think every time Acuna is at bat, you feel like he does something to destroy the Mets, and that's a million times each season. So you don't have that feeling with Judge. Now, it does feel like he did even more of his damage early in his career against the Mets. So yeah, it's fair. I mean, obviously you could have a big series at Citi Field, but the Mets have been able to, considering how great of a player he is, the Mets have been able to somewhat keep him in check. Yes or no? And that's why I like the push there. Yes or no? Will the Mets win the Subway Series this weekend? It's a tough one to start with for you, Joe.
Oh, man.
There's no reason to think that they should, but do you really have it in you to pick against them?
Baseball is just...
I know.
I love it, but sometimes it's the most stupid sport ever, where these things just happen. Yeah, you get crushed by the Pirates for a weekend, and then the Mets will go and rally off a good week against two good teams like Milwaukee and the Yankees. So, you know what? I don't have it in me to potentially say that the Yankees are going to win a series against the Mets. Ew. So I will say the Mets will win the Subway Series this weekend. 2 out of 3. No sweep, 2 out of 3.
So the Yankees right now are lined up, as we record on Tuesday, Max Fried is pitching against the Blue Jays, Will Warren, and then Clark Schmidt. So in theory, you're seeing Rodon in the Subway Series. And then what do you get?
Marcus Stroman?
Marcus Stroman is back. Oh, wow. That's got some juice to it.
Oh, bring that game on.
That's got some real juice to it. So then do you get Fried on the end of the series, Sunday night?
You might, yeah.
You probably get Fried Sunday night, which is, oof. That's really tough. I hate to be this guy, but the way it's lined up, I am going to go no. The Mets repeat, although the Mets play really good at home against the Yankees. So maybe I'll regret this one, but I'll say no. I just don't like the way the pitch. That Fried matchup on Sunday is just absolutely brutal. If they have to start, and I keep doing this, and it's just, we have to do it. You have to talk about it. If they have to start Blackburn on Friday and face Fried on Sunday, it's just, it would take some upsets, which is maybe what the Mets need to kind of get their mojo back. Over under push for Mets wins, Joe. I get to kick this one off. I'm going to go with a push. I think they win 3-6 this week. I don't think they're fully back, but I think they kind of find some even ground right now and play 500 baseball.
I'm going to go a push as well. And frankly, I want, if they get a push, I'm happy. Like, this will be
Brewers are playing really good right now, by the way.
Brewers are playing great ball. The Yankees are obviously a very good team. And the Mets coming off just such a rough stretch. Having an even week gets you 1 week closer to Sean Manaea, 1 week closer to Kodai Senga, 1 week closer to Jesse Winker, 1 week closer to Brooks Raley. So let's hold the fort for just a few days, and soon enough they'll get some help. So I will push with you.
All right, before we dive into the mailbag, let's announce some Mets Pod hat sweepstakes winners. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the beautiful Mets Pod hat. Frank Piombo, Jennifer Scanna, James Raymond Jensen Jr., and Elizabeth DeYoung are our 4 winners of the Mets Pod hat. So congrats, everybody. SMY will reach out to you for shipping info. So please respond to them so you could actually get your hat sent to you. Congrats, and we'll do more hat giveaways soon. So keep listening for that. All right, Joe, let's close out with some mailbag questions here. King Gabagool from YouTube asks, total hypothetical, but if you had the power to instantly heal one injury that the team currently has, who would you pick and why? So this question is really interesting because the first time I read it, I was just thinking of, like, how do we just completely erase an injury from memory? But this is instantly heal that the team currently has. So this is, you are getting somebody back today. You can't right the wrongs of the last couple of weeks due to injuries. So, Joe, who would you have back on this team instantly today.
You know what, Connor? I'm going to flip the script here. I want you to go first because I have two options, and I want to see if you take one of them. So I will let you go first.
So this might surprise people, but I'm going to go with Kodai Senga. And my reason being is Kodai Senga, and I understand the injury concerns, and this is probably why the Mets got Kodai Senga on a 5-year, $75 million deal, right? Throughout that process. Like, there was always going to be some durability concerns with Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga, when healthy, is one of the best pitchers in the National League. Kodai Senga this year, 7-3, a 1.47 ERA, and 13 starts. It's just, at the end of the day, all of this talk around the Mets is they don't have an ace. They don't have an ace. And I understand if part of being an ace is going out there every fifth day. I don't think you're wrong at all if that's your pushback against Senga. But from a performance standpoint, when he's on the mound, Kodai Senga is the ace of the Mets. And if I can get him back today, it would give me a feeling that unfortunately we just don't have with the current group of pitchers right now. And they need Senga and Minaya back to get this feeling that every day those guys go out there, you have a really good chance to win.
I get it. And, theoretically you wish him back and then something else happens is something
that's the risk. It's the highest risk reward, right?
Yeah.
Because Senga can pull a calf muscle or something in the third inning of his return. It's unfortunate, but Senga's also the best pitcher on the Mets. By far, I don't even think it's close.
It isn't close. So he would be the most impactful probably to get back today. The reason I didn't pick someone like him or someone like Sean Manaea is because if things continue according to plan, they're going to be back in the next couple of weeks. So I only get to heal one person. So I need to heal somebody that is not pitching anymore or not playing anymore. So I think honestly, when we came in, I thought you were going to say AJ Minter. To me, that felt like kind of almost the obvious one. Man, could you imagine how much deeper and better that bullpen looks if AJ Minter is setting up for Edwin Diaz and everyone's slotted down and everything will look a lot better if AJ Minter is there. So that would be the main one, but I will throw in a bonus, a guy we haven't talked about in months. But could you imagine how much different we'd feel right now if Christian Scott never got Tommy John surgery?
Man, I forgot he existed.
Yeah, just a healthy member back end of the rotation. Like he had Tommy John obviously last October, and by all accounts, he's trending in the right direction, and we should, look to see him for a relatively normal spring training in 2026. But given we're worried about should they call up Brandon Sproat, who has an ERA of 5 at AAA and left-handers are crushing him, or should they call up Nolan McLean? They could have just had somebody who was already here in Christian Scott filling in at the back end of the rotation. So I will go Minter as my main and Christian Scott as my wild card.
That's a great call, Joe. I never even thought of Scott. Now, so he had surgery, I believe, in September, right?
Yeah, September or October. I forget.
So in theory, Scott should be ready for spring training next year, right?
That's the plan. The plan as of now is for him to be ready to go, if not full go, close to full go when spring training begins in 2026.
Man, it's just a guy that you just forget is even in the system and could genuinely be the Mets' fourth or fifth starter out of the gate next year. So great call by you. I would love to have Christian Scott on this team right now, but and I agree. I think you won that one. All right, Tyrone Taylor lover on Twitter at Terens is King. Wow, Tyrone Taylor, Louis Terens, mega fan. Respect. Two kind of separate questions. Do you think Byron Buxton would be a realistic trade candidate? Do you believe that there's one thing that could flip the switch with this team, or is it more of a problem with how this roster was constructed? So, Joe, we talked about Buxton before, and I know you're a huge fan of the player, especially when he's healthy. Who isn't? I think the second part of this question is so interesting that is there a flip the switch aspect with this team, or is this a legitimate problem that is multi-layered and not solvable with, let's call it 2 to 3 moves?
So quickly on Byron Buxton, we have talked about him before. That's the kind of move that if you're talking about making an impact big move, Byron Buxton's the kind of guy you want to look at. And is he realistic? If he's available, sure. The the realistic part is he available? He signed a long-term deal with Minnesota. He has 3 years and $45 million left, which isn't really all that much.
No,
So like
it's nothing today.
Mets can obviously handle that. He has a no trade clause. He supposedly loves it in Minnesota. So I don't know how realistic it is that he's available. But if he is, the Mets certainly have the pieces to go and figure out a trade to put Byron Buxton in center field. And that would be the Cespedes type of move or whatever. Like, I think that would be the put you over the top type of offensive move. It's just a matter of, is he available? And then when it comes to, is there one thing that could flip the switch with this team? I mean, there's two things.
I know the answer.
Win some baseball games is one. And then two, get healthy. Like, I think one, and I hate that we keep hearkening back to getting healthy, and people don't want to hear that, because what they want to hear is it needs to be fixed today. The Mets need to win tonight against Milwaukee. So who cares that Sean Manaea is a week and a half away and Kodai Senga's 2 weeks away and Winker's 2 weeks, whatever. Like, they don't want to necessarily hear about that, but that is how they're going to turn it around. They're going to make moves at the deadline. There's no way around it. They're going to make multiple moves. It's just a matter of, are we talking 2 or 3? But the reality is, the Mets are going to succeed based on their players performing and their players getting healthy. That's what's going to drive it. And then the deadline is to supplement it and build around the core that you have in place.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely valid, and something we talk about on this show quite consistently. I think in another simple form, even without solving all of those things, and the health, I think, will solve itself, hopefully. And there will be deadline moves. Just a matter of what's the volume of deadline moves and what's the magnitude, but also the quiet. I mean, not so quietly, but it's because they've all been good. But is there a month where Lindor, P, and Soto are all hot? A month where they're all hot at the same time? That's because they've all been good this year. There's been greatness from Soto in June. I mean, it's everything you would ever dream of when you sign Juan Soto. But the reality is, Joe, those three at the top of the order, if they were hot at the same time, nothing else matters.
You're not noticing 7, 8, 9 or whatever. You're not noticing the bottom of the order nearly as much if those guys are all clicking at their highest capabilities. And then maybe you surround that with like Nimmo being solid and McNeil being solid, not even being awesome, just those guys being solid around it. You're not really worried so much about the bottom of the order then. It's just a matter of, it feels like when one of those 3 star players is on fire, not that the other 2 are cold, but there's not the other ones aren't on fire as well.
Well, let me back it up for you here, because you can argue borderline that they have been cold. We haven't seen all 3 of them going at the same time. And what I mean by that is, let's start with Juan Soto, right? Juan Soto, and we always combine April and March, 31 games, 752 OPS. May started to heat up a little bit, but still only a 792 OPS. June, almost a 1,200 OPS. Soto was very mediocre the first month of the season, solid the second month of the season, possibly the best player in the sport the third month of the season.
By OPS, literally the best player in the sport in the month of June.
Joe, Pete Alonso, 31 games, April, March, first month of the season. OPS over 1,100. Pete was one of the best players in the sport when Juan Soto was a mediocre player. In May, 693 for Pete.
Wow.
Pete was bad in May.
I kind of feel like I don't even remember that happening.
Same. He was not good in May. June, 920 OPS. Pete was amazing the first month of the season, bad the second month of the season, really good the third month of the season. Juan Soto went from not so great, mediocre, to solid, to elite.
Yep.
Francisco Lindor, first month of the season, 872 OPS for a Gold Glove shortstop, borderline elite.
Yep.
Second month of the season, May, this is when P is really bad, 802. solid for a Gold Glove shortstop. Not great, but solid.
Good.
June, when Juan Soto is one of maybe the best player in the game and Pete's really dang good, 628. There's always been one of them significantly underperforming that is the player that they are. While the other two are, one's elite, one's really good. We have not had the month where all three are firing away. And I don't think you could stop this offense no matter what else the rest of the offense does if all three have a month where they all have an 875 to a 950 OPS amongst the three. So that's
Connor. I love that you had those stats. That's fantastic. And you know what? We're recording here on July 1st. What better month to do it?
Yeah, this is
right
time.
Now?
Let's go.
What better time than now? Let's do the thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the secret sauce equation here is that they've all had good years, but it's always been 2 out of the 3. And even if 2 out of the 3 were elite at the same time, that would be the difference. But it's really one's good, one's elite, the other is struggling. So we're going to kind of see if that. And Joe, I don't know about you. I believe we're going to get that month. I just don't know if it's going to be July, August, or September. But you take it when you can get it.
So Connor, if you had to pick, is September the month you'd rather have it? They're going through. They're going through it right now, but September is like you could close down anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. You always want to ride into the playoffs hot. It sounds insane to say. I do have this internal fear, and this is the doom in me, that if it's all the way in September, that they could be in a bad place in September. I want the Mets to win the division. I'm not sitting here like, hey, sneak into the playoffs, anything can happen. I'm done with that. I want the Mets hosting a playoff game at Citi Field. I want them winning the division. I think my odd take is, Joe, I would want it to be August.
Interesting. So like
which
right
is probably
after the deadline guys come in, it's like a whole new feel, which frankly, that's, if you think about the 2015 Mets, Connor, that's when they really took off, was the month of August. And you know what? You want to win the East. I want to win the East. Everyone listening wants to. If you want to have an optimistic standpoint, as bad as the Mets have played, they're still within a game and a half of the division. And yes, they had a lead and they gave it away. But don't forget, it was just a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, whatever, that the Phillies lost 9 of 10 and got swept by the Pirates. So, they had one of those stretches. The Mets are going through it now. It's time they bounce out of it. And the Mets are still squarely in play to win the NL East. So the sky isn't necessarily falling.
My surprise argument for August is, because a lot of people be like, what about July? Can they carry us out of this? I think there will be, unfortunately, some more games in July that the pitching just doesn't give them a chance while they're waiting to get healthy. It won't be as bad as it's been this second half of June. But in August, if they have Manaea and Senga and competitive starts from everyone else, the Mets can have a mammoth August. And if it's September, then it's September. But we're going to wait and see if that month, ultimately gets here. All right, last one real quick here, Joe. This is from Jane Mitch on Twitter. Have we seen enough of Baty, Vientos, and Mauricio to know if they have a future with the Mets or now can be packaged in a deal? I would quickly, Joe, from me, go, they are probably still lukewarm on Mauricio. They are concerned, but maybe hopeful Vientos gets going. I don't think the Mets view Baty, unfortunately, as this long-term piece, and I think they'd be pretty willing to move him in the right deal.
Yeah, we'll make this one quick. And I was actually on with John Jastrzemski, SNY contributor. I was on his podcast, and we kind of had a conversation along these lines. Vientos is like the biggest X factor, I think, for the rest of the season in the Mets lineup. So I don't think he's someone you're talking about trading. Ronnie Mauricio, this is a guy that just needs more reps. He missed a full season with the torn ACL. He just needs to keep playing. And, I give the Mets credit for keeping him up to the big leagues and giving him the opportunity to play nearly every day. Like, good for them. My pitch was always Mauricio has to play every day, whether it's here or in Syracuse. So good for the Mets. And frankly, he's flashed enough that I want to see more.
I agree.
Like, I don't want to
24.
I don't want to trade Mauricio away. And then we are doing a podcast July 1st, 2026. Be like, look at Ronnie Mauricio with his 870 OPS with Tampa Bay. Like, it wouldn't be nice if the Mets had that. Baty is the answer that at this point, I wonder if he is just that change of scenery guy where he does good things here. His defense has taken a step forward and he flashes some offensive stuff, but it's just too inconsistent. Has been too inconsistent over too elongated of a period of time. So I wonder if Baty is the guy that you say at this deadline, hey, this is a guy you trade to upgrade the team elsewhere, and hopefully he goes somewhere and takes off because, love Brett Baty, great guy, great worker, works really hard. I just wonder if it's ever going to come together consistently here.
Right. That's like a sweetener in a deal for a team.
Yeah.
If you're getting a starting third baseman and you move a mid-level prospect for that player, but they're also like, you know what, we need somebody. Let's play Brett Baty every day for the last 2 months of the season, and maybe we have something with him on top of the prospect we're getting back. And if the Mets don't have any reps for him anymore, I think Baty could be the guy of the three that are moved. You don't sell this low on Vientos. That would be really, really bad business. And I want people to realize, after missing a year of injury and needing more time in AAA, and he just turned 24, but after missing a year, really looking at him as a 23-year-old, Mauricio is a prospect. He is a developmental player right now, and you don't just give away a developmental player, to give away a developmental player. This is the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Taking a Cadillac is more than just taking a drive. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate every journey. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer. Remember to subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can leave us a review as you heard today with a question. We'll look for those for a future mailbag. Of course, you can watch every episode on SNY's YouTube channel, so become a subscriber over there as well. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.